It had been a long day. The kind where everything seemed to be dragging, and I just needed to unwind. I'd been looking forward to seeing this new museum they'd been talking about for months, $850 million worth of renovations, a big expansion, and a major facelift. I was curious to see if all the hype was justified. Walking through the entrance, I was immediately struck by how modern everything looked. The sleek lines, the polished marble floors, the bright lights. The staff were dressed immaculately, smiling and greeting the handful of visitors milling around. But something felt off. As I approached the check-in desk, a woman, probably in her early 30s, looked up from her computer screen. I could tell she was already annoyed, like she had been dealing with people all day. "Can I help you?" she asked, barely lifting her eyes from the screen. I smiled politely, trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. "Just here to see the expansion, I heard a lot about it. I'm looking forward to it." She sighed, clearly uninterested. "Yeah, sure. I'll get you your ticket. One moment." She swiped my credit card and handed me a ticket without even looking at me. I couldn't help but feel a bit dismissed. But I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a bad day for her, and I wasn't about to let something like this ruin my visit. As I walked past the check-in desk, I noticed the museum staff were all running around, managing different sections of the grand new exhibit. The place was buzzing with energy, with the promise of cutting-edge art and exhibits everyone had been waiting for. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman behind the desk had been less than welcoming. I made my way to the first gallery, a massive room filled with vibrant paintings. Each piece seemed to tell a story, inviting you to step inside its world. I started to get absorbed in the art, but my thoughts were still tangled around that brief interaction. It wasn't like I was expecting special treatment, but it stung a little. After all, I had poured millions into this expansion. The $850 million the museum had been so proud of. That came from investors like me. What the staff didn't know, and wouldn't know unless I told them, was that I wasn't just any ordinary visitor. I was one of the key financial backers of this project. The very reason this museum had its sleek new exhibits and expansive galleries was because of people like me. And here I was, standing in the middle of it all, practically invisible. I walked deeper into the exhibition, trying to enjoy the pieces, but that feeling of being ignored by someone who should have been thanking me for my contribution to this place wouldn't leave me. I continued my tour, but my mind kept drifting back to that moment with the staff member. How could someone so oblivious treat a visitor like that, especially in a place funded by people like me? I decided to explore a more private section of the museum, hoping it would clear my mind. The hall was quieter here, with only a few people milling about. The artwork on the walls seemed even more impressive. There were pieces that hadn't been publicly displayed before, fresh from top-tier artists. I was captivated, momentarily forgetting about everything else. But as I made my way down the hall, I caught sight of the same staff member from earlier. She was chatting with one of her colleagues, clearly distracted. And then, without hesitation, she looked straight past me, barely noticing I was standing right in front of her. The words she muttered to her coworker made my blood boil. "You know, I'm just so tired of the rich people coming in here, acting like they own the place. As if they're the reason any of this exists." I stood there, frozen, as the reality of her words hit me. She had no idea who I was or what role I played in the museum's success. She just assumed that someone like me, someone in a suit, was part of the usual crowd, not worth acknowledging. It was a slap in the face, but one that I was not about to let slide. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. The last thing I wanted was to escalate things. But the more I thought about it, the more the injustice of it all boiled inside me. She had no idea who she was dismissing, no clue about the power and influence behind the walls she worked in. I approached the pair, my footsteps purposeful, not rushed. I could feel her eyes flicker toward me as I got closer, her colleague still talking about some recent event in the museum. I was just a few feet away now, my presence undeniable. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cool and steady. She looked up, her smile quickly fading as recognition hit her. I could see the realization dawning on her face, as she began to understand who I might be. You, she stammered, unsure of what to say. I didn't wait for her to finish. I overheard what you said earlier. I think you might be unaware of who exactly helps fund this institution. I paused, allowing the weight of my words to settle. Her face turned pale as the implications of my statement sank in. I'm sorry, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean, let me make something clear, I interrupted, my tone firm but not unkind. I'm one of the financial backers behind this expansion, the very one who made this all possible. So when you treat people like me as if we're nothing more than just rich people, you're insulting not just me, but everyone who made this place what it is. So, if you want to continue working here, I suggest you learn a little respect. Her face was now flushed with embarrassment, and I could see her struggling to find the right words, but the damage was done. The dynamic had shifted. She was no longer the dismissive staff member, she was just a worker, now fully aware of the magnitude of her mistake. I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving her standing there, stunned. As I moved deeper into the museum, I could feel the weight of the encounter lingering in the back of my mind. But at the same time, there was a sense of satisfaction. I wasn't a person to back down when disrespected, especially not in a place I had invested so much into. A few minutes passed before I was approached again. This time, it was a much higher-ranking member of the museum staff, a well-dressed man in his late 50s, with graying hair and a stern expression. I recognized him immediately. He was the head curator, the one responsible for overseeing the entire expansion. Mr. Harris, I believe, he said, his voice polite yet clearly professional. I'd like to apologize for the incident you experienced earlier. Our staff member has been informed about the inappropriate comments, and I assure you, this will be addressed immediately. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the ground for a moment. It's not just about the comments, I replied, keeping my voice even. It's about respect. People like her, and the attitude they project, can't just be brushed off. I completely understand, he said, his tone more empathetic now. Rest assured, this will not be tolerated. We deeply appreciate your contribution to the museum's success, and the last thing we want is to have one of our visitors, especially someone as important as yourself, feel unappreciated. There it was, the shift I'd been waiting for. The recognition of my role in all this, finally acknowledged. But even as the curator spoke, I couldn't help but wonder, was this apology enough? Was it enough to make up for the lack of professionalism and the blatant disregard for someone who had helped make this museum a reality? I hope the apology isn't just for show, I said, my eyes meeting his. Because the museum is relying on people like me to keep its doors open. Without people who invest in this place, all the fancy exhibits mean nothing. The curator nodded, his expression turning serious. Of course. We'll make sure the staff member understands the gravity of this. Thank you for your patience and for bringing this to our attention. We will rectify this. The rest of my time at the museum was surprisingly peaceful after that exchange. I continued to explore the exhibits, but my mind wasn't as focused on the art anymore. I found myself reflecting on how easily people took certain things for granted, how someone could be so quick to judge based on appearances without understanding the bigger picture. It was an unsettling realization, but one I needed to face. As I was walking through the final gallery, a member of the staff approached me again. This time, it wasn't the curator, but one of the museum's high-ranking board members. He had a calm, almost apologetic demeanor. Mr. Harris, he greeted me, extending his hand. I wanted to personally thank you for your generosity, not just in terms of funding, but in your feedback. The staff member you encountered earlier was actually new, and I've already spoken with her. She's deeply regretful of her actions. I shook his hand, but I didn't immediately respond. Part of me felt the satisfaction of knowing my words had made a difference, but another part of me was still unsettled by the earlier encounter. I understand people make mistakes, I said finally, looking him in the eye. But this isn't just a mistake in behavior. It's a reflection of a deeper issue, one that needs to be addressed, so others don't follow suit. The museum might be a space for art, but it also needs to be a place where respect is practiced on every level, not just at the top. He nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right. We're committed to fostering an environment where everyone, from staff to visitors, feels valued. We've already initiated additional training for the entire team to prevent this from happening again. I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the catalyst for real change. Maybe, in some small way, this incident had made the museum not just a place for art, but a place where respect would be held in as high regard as the exhibits themselves. I appreciate that, I said, the tension starting to melt from my shoulders. Just ensure that no one else feels like they're invisible. We all have a part to play in this. The board member smiled warmly. Thank you, Mr. Harris. We'll do better. A week had passed since the incident at the museum, and to my surprise, I found myself reflecting on it more than I expected. That encounter had stirred something in me, a reminder that even the smallest gestures of disrespect could carry weight, especially when people weren't aware of who they were dealing with. But more than that, it was a wake-up call. If I didn't speak up, nothing would change. I received a call later that week from the curator. He told me that the staff member who had made the comments had been given a formal warning and was scheduled for sensitivity training, along with the rest of the staff. But what stood out most in his message wasn't the action taken, it was the tone of appreciation in his voice, the recognition that people like me were more than just silent financial backers. We were the ones that helped create, support, and shape places like this, and our contributions deserved acknowledgment. The real twist came when I received an invitation to a special event at the museum, a gala to celebrate the expansion. It was a high-profile gathering with key figures from the art world, philanthropists, and even a few politicians. As I arrived, I noticed the same staff member, but this time, she was beaming, greeting guests with warmth and confidence. There was no trace of the earlier tension or disinterest. I made my way through the event, enjoying the fine wine and mingling with other guests. But as the evening wore on, I found myself standing near the same staff member once again. She caught my eye and made her way toward me, looking slightly nervous but determined to make things right. Mr. Harris, she said, her voice steady. I just wanted to personally apologize again for my earlier behavior. I've learned so much from the feedback you gave, and I can assure you that I'll never treat anyone like that again. Thank you for helping me see the bigger picture. I smiled, feeling a sense of closure. No need to apologize. It wasn't just about you, but about all of us. I'm glad you're taking it to heart. As we shook hands, I could tell she had genuinely taken the lesson to heart. The atmosphere in the museum felt different now, lighter, more respectful. I realized that this entire situation had turned into something positive, something that would have a ripple effect, not just for this museum, but for the way people interacted with each other in spaces that mattered. I left that night feeling fulfilled. Not because the incident had been resolved, but because it had been an opportunity for growth, both for the staff and for me. The museum wasn't just a symbol of art anymore. It had become a symbol of respect, and I was proud to have played a part in that transformation. Months had passed since the gala, and I had almost forgotten about the initial incident. The museum was flourishing, its expansion had brought in more visitors, and the exhibits continued to gain recognition for their world-class presentations. But something had changed beneath the surface, something that went beyond the art. The shift in attitude, respect, and professionalism among the staff was palpable. One day, I received an unexpected call from the curator again. This time, it wasn't about a problem or a complaint, but rather an invitation. The museum was planning an important exhibition featuring works that would highlight the diverse contributions of various communities to the art world, and they wanted me to attend the opening as a special guest. The curator mentioned that the staff had been through several rounds of training on empathy and communication, and they were committed to ensuring that everyone who walked through the doors felt valued and respected. When I arrived for the opening event, I was struck by how different the atmosphere felt. The staff was now genuinely engaged, interacting with visitors in a warm and welcoming way. That same staff member who had once dismissed me was now one of the lead greeters, greeting me with a smile and sincere gratitude for my support. Her professionalism had grown immensely, and I could see the positive influence my feedback had created. Later in the evening, the curator approached me again, this time with a glass of wine in hand. "Mr. Harris," he said with a smile. "I just wanted to personally thank you again for your involvement. What you did, speaking up when you could have stayed silent, has sparked a change in our entire team. We're a better museum because of it." As I watched people moving through the exhibits, engaging with the art and each other, I realized the true power of a single conversation. What began as a small act of being dismissed had grown into something larger, a catalyst for change in a place that was meant to inspire and bring people together. And in the end, it wasn't just about the money or the art, it was about respect, the kind of respect that makes a space not just a physical structure, but a true reflection of the values it stands for. I walked away that night knowing I had made a lasting impact, not just on the museum, but on the people who worked there. In the end, it wasn't the investment that mattered most, it was the way we treated one another that made the biggest difference. As time went on, I continued to visit the museum regularly, each time seeing more improvements, not just in the exhibits, but in the way the staff interacted with each visitor. There was a noticeable change in the energy of the place. I had contributed not only to the museum's growth but to its culture as well, and it felt good knowing that my influence had made a lasting difference. On one of my visits, I was approached by the museum's director, who told me something I hadn't expected. "Mr. Harris, we've been thinking about it, and we'd like to honor you at our next big fundraiser. Your contribution goes beyond just financial support, it's about the respect and vision you've helped instill in this place. You've truly shaped the museum's future in more ways than one." That moment of acknowledgement felt surreal, but it was a reminder that sometimes, the most unexpected moments, like a chance encounter with a dismissive staff member, can lead to profound and lasting change. By speaking up, I hadn't just solved one small problem, I had sparked a shift that would echo throughout the museum for years to come. And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't the gala, the event, or even the recognition that mattered most, it was the lasting impact on the people, the space, and the culture that would carry forward, long after the expansions and exhibitions were gone.